Welcome to the Practical Enneagram. Excited to share this person with you. She's really inspiring to me, and what she's sharing about is very inspiring. It's her work as a guide for Enneagram Prison Project. I pretty much instantly fell in love with Dana Vitorelo when I was taught by her on EPP's video training. The way she teaches the Enneagram is just so powerful, so full of heart. So Dana is a guide and faculty for Susan Alesic's amazing Enneagram Prison Project. EPP takes the Enneagram into the heart of the prison systems globally. It is the most incredible organisation I can think of in the Enneagram world, both in terms of its values and its output. If you don't know about it, there are many ways to engage with EPP now, which has recently celebrated its 10-year anniversary, including training as a guide. EPP has a great podcast. The link is in the episode notes. Enjoy hearing from this person really doing the work without talking about it very much. Exactly as a guide for Enneagram Prison Project. So just an overview.
Yeah. So at Enneagram Prison Project, we don't call ourselves teachers, we call ourselves guides, because we're really shoulder to shoulder. We're on the path together. And so we work with the Enneagram, we work with trauma, we work with addiction, and we try to help people, including ourselves, and literally live it. With self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-compassion. So how can we heal and transform, really focusing on those three things and having the Enneagram be the foundation to help us to see the patterns of thinking, feeling, and doing that we habitually do, that we may not even know that we do, but are causing us pain quite often. So how do we change that if we want to, or just become aware of it?
You described your sense of finding your people when you first started doing this work. Can you say more about that? Just because I think it will help clue people into who you are and what you're about.
Yeah. So I met Alex Senegal and Victor Soto, EPP ambassadors, at an Enneagram training that I was doing through the Narrative Enneagram. They were staying there with a whole bunch of us as we were taking this training. And I think many people who have heard me teach have heard this story at some point or another. I was sitting in the back. I made it really clear to people I didn't want to make friends. I was just there to learn. I was there to figure shit out. So everyone just kind of took a wide berth. And Alex was so sweet to me and gave me a really wide berth. And Vic was like, yeah, no, sorry, challenge accepted. Like, we're going to be friends. This is going to happen. And after not very long, I was like, oh man, these guys are the real deal. Like, they're changed. I mean, Alex was 30 days out of of incarceration. Vic was a year out, and they were so real and so refreshing and using the Enneagram. And I was like, this is it. And then I met Susan and I met Rick, and I did one of my trainings with Rick there as well, our, executive director and our founder, Rick and Susan. And I was like, okay, this is it. And it was really, Rick and Susan are amazing. It was Vic and Alex that had me, this might be what I want to do with my life. I mean, and I had no idea why I was at the training, which is another kind of interesting thing, like the universe just putting me where I needed to be. I just knew I had to be there. Really quickly after that, I did my first kind of training with EPP, which was throw you in jail, see what happens, with a lot of love. So this is not like I was left fully unsupported, but it really was throw you in jail and see what happens. And I was like, yeah, these are my people. I was with a group of men in Elmwood in a program called RCP. And I was sitting on a 6-panel with a gentleman. And I would go back and forth between 5 and 6 because I have a really strong 5 wing. I also didn't understand the Enneagram like I understand the Enneagram now. And I was like, oh, there's like no question that I'm a 6. Like, every word that is coming out of his mouth is like verbatim what I am thinking, what I am feeling, the things that I do, the ways that I get myself in trouble, the beautiful traits that I have as a human being. He and I were doing a dyad exercise, and he said to me, you're going to be okay. But it was so funny. Like, I was such a mirror for him sitting in there, just as he was a mirror for me. Like, he felt compelled to be like, you're going to survive this. You're going to be okay. And I was like, yeah, I am like so neurotic in my not knowing. And I just knew from like that moment with him on panel, the exercise afterwards, I was like, these guys care. They're real. They're hungry. Like, this is where I want to be. I want to have those conversations because I'm hungry. I want to do the work. I've been in other places where we talk about doing the work. We talk our way around it. We know the jargon. We know all of the things we're supposed to say, but there's not an actual kind of doing or being around it. And in custody, there is. There's like a pursuit of finding our essential self. It's beautiful. So,
Dana, let's talk about what's unique about these students, because it is obviously a unique set of students. Can you speak to that a little? What makes them maybe primed for Enneagram work, if that's the right word?
Yeah. Well, so I will give an example. I can walk into a high school or a corporation, so two drastically different demographics, and ask people if they understand how their personality causes them to suffer. And the majority of the time, people are like, nope, my personality is great. It's not causing me to suffer. Everything else is causing me to suffer. I can walk into a prison classroom, a jail classroom, and say, is your personality causing you to suffer? Is it getting you in trouble? And everyone's like, I'm sitting here in fucking stripes or blue or orange. Like, are you an idiot? Of course my personality is causing me to suffer. Like, there's no question. So getting through that kind of resistance that a lot of us have on the outside, it's not there. It's so easy. And like, I mean, you've seen me, you're experiencing me. I'm rough around the edges, right? I swear I've got a brash sense of humor. I can be really abrasive. I want to go straight for the hard thing. And not everyone appreciates that. And yet in prison, it's a little bit of like, yeah, give me more. Like, thank you. Please tell me the truth. Like I can't change what I can't see. And so together we're in there trying to help each other. And my students help me as much as I help them. I'm not sitting up here and like, call me out on my shit. And I had a type 2 that was like, hey, you're always telling me I need to do stuff for me. And I feel like you don't do anything for you. All you do is work. Fuck, he's right. All of these kind of self-care things are so I can continue working. This was years ago. And I was like, thank you. And so there's something where, God, we're in it together in here. Like, and it feels like that. We're surviving together. We're growing together. We're healing together. There's a camaraderie that happens in that classroom. And not to say it doesn't happen in 9 Persons, 1 Key or Path to Freedom, right? I mean, it also happens in there. But there's something different when you're in such a place that is so unsafe, that is so traumatizing, that is so violent in so many ways. And then these individuals are coming into the classroom and sitting there and getting vulnerable and crying and hugging each other and saying, you've got this, you can do this, you can change, we can all change. And there's nothing actually inherently wrong with you at all. So there's something so beautiful that kind of in a place of such pain and punishment that our students are willing to crack open and just try. Just have faith and have courage and see what happens. Because honestly, if I was in custody, I don't know if I would go into the Enneagram class and listen to that woo-woo shit that people are trying to talk to me about. Like, I just don't know that it's something that I would have the courage to do, the faith to do, or the trust to do. And like continuously, students come back over and over and over again. In facilities, we have wait lists. Like, it's incredible. The way that violence and trauma gets perpetuated, right? So our students here are they're trying to break the chains of transgenerational trauma, of violence, of these habituated patterns and ways of being that actually, in many ways, they didn't choose. They were indoctrinated into it. And it feels like I get to be there and help facilitate something that is like magically happening and coming forth from them. So it really feels like nothing I can take credit for, and something that I am so lucky to be able to be present to, and so humbled. They put me to shame in the doing inner work. And I will take a lot of kind of patting myself on the back and saying, I really do my best to live to walk my talk and to live the work. And I just am continuously humbled by, students on the outside for sure, But on the inside, it is such a difficult place to do our work.
Okay, so six on the Enneagram. Aspects of type structure that come alive through your work as a guide. So positive and negative, but I'm going to say mostly positive because I know you'll probably otherwise just focus on the negative ones. What amazing aspects of 6 come alive through your work as a guide?
So I think curiosity, right? Like something that is a double-edged sword in the 6 is we have lots of questions. And sometimes that can not be good because we can be saying them in a way that is feels accusatory, right? Versus curious. And so in the classroom, I am immensely curious. And I think that I ask incredible questions. And many of the other 6s I know ask incredible questions as well. And I want to know the answer. I'm not just like asking to ask you something. I want to know the answer. So I think that one of the greatest parts of my type structure that is so helpful that comes up is I'm so curious. And I want to like get to the root of it with you. And so again, that can be 2 ways, because if someone's like, yeah, I need to stop here, then I like have to take a breath and pause and say, okay, we're stopping there. Right. Even if my type wants to like keep digging deeper. So that is kind of a double-edged one, but curiosity. I also, 6s, like Helen Palmer says, 6s have like that 6th sense of like intuition. And so I have a very strong intuition, like not only being social dominant and like reading the room and understanding kind of people's energy and having done group process work for, over 15 years, but my intuition, like I can just feel when something is spot on. I can feel when something is off, whether it's like a kind of a misalignment and someone's not understanding me because I'm not being clear, or someone is full of shit, right? Our bullshit detector. I'm very, very good at that. And I also have no problem having the hard conversation, calling those things out and going there. And sometimes that can be an edge for people of, well, I didn't know how hard to go or how deep to go, and I will just kind of relentlessly go until I am like, okay, it's time to stop. And then I can stop that. So there is something within my type structure that, can help me be in this kind of tenacious pursuit of something and then stop when the boundary, whether it's verbal or energetic, has been set by the other person. I will also say that I see this a lot in myself and other people, especially organizationally in EPP. I'm really good at setting a safe container because I am so acutely aware of wanting to feel safe myself that then I will project that onto my students. And we can't do the work if we don't feel safe at all. And it's probably perpetuating a trauma response and some kind of violation that someone may have had in their past, like a violation of boundaries. So setting a safe container, making sure that that container stays safe. I'm really good at that. And I think that almost all 6s that I know are awesome at that, and really knowing how to support people in what that person's respective next steps are, because we know what support feels like to us. So being able to match people in like, hey, this is what I think might be supportive for you. Let me check in. Is that a miss? Is that a hit? Like what, and kind of have the conversation around that and then move forward and help them with that.
There's a lot of skills you're needing to bring forth when you're doing that work. It sounds like you're doing so you do one-on-one work as well as group work. Yeah,
I do. Not in custody, but I do one-on-one work outside of custody.
Okay. And then maybe more challenging aspects of type coming up in the work.
Yes. So the one that we already hit on is that the curiosity can turn into almost a prying or a digging. And very early on, I would say on panel, and I still say this because it still can be a blind spot for me. And I feel like if I call it out ahead of time, I'm less likely to do it. And then people know that they have full permission and that this is us together and not me telling you something, which always feels gross to me because it really is us doing this together. I'm like, look, if you tell me you don't know, I will ask you the question 600 times in different ways to help you get to your answer. So if it really is that you don't know and you want help getting there, we'll do that. If it's that you don't want to answer or you're uncomfortable or anything like that, tell me and I'll stop. But like I can be, in this single-minded pursuit of, well, let's help you know. And sometimes the I don't know is just a really gentle way of like, lady, I don't want to fucking answer this. Like I am too uncomfortable, or I don't want to know, or I don't want to dig, or there's just so much ego resistance that I literally can't right now. And so I am like full permission to tell me, I don't want to go there. I don't want to answer that. So that can be one, is like that, just being so tenacious and like not knowing when to stop. And it's one of the many ways that I invite my students. I'm like, I'm working this edge, and you can help me work it too. So as I'm helping you work your edges, you can help me work mine. And I found that the participants in my classes love that. Like they love being able to call me out on my shit. They're so gleeful about it. And it is so sweet. It's just, and then trust is built, because I'm not, Jesus, do not put me on a pedestal, because I am not perfect. I'm going to fuck up. I'm human. And then hopefully we can have the repair. So, the prying and the digging, the going too deep, too fast. Yeah, that's been an edge I've had to work. Like you say one thing and then I will just drop us 50 miles deeper than that, instead of like a little bit of scaffolding, like it's just, and the look on people's faces is like, oh my God, like what did I get myself into? And I'm like, right. Too deep, too fast. Noted. You don't have to answer that. We don't have to go there.
But you're so transparent about it. I love it. You bring them in on your work. I mean, what else could you do? That's the best. I feel like that's the best workaround for that. What else, Dana? Does anything else get you into trouble?
I have one more, because this is one that I wrote down because I wanted to make sure I had kind of an equal amount.
Oh.
And didn't do the overly negative bias.
Good.
I can be too blunt and I can be abrasive. And I have learned over the years to soften and to not assume that I know, because sometimes I can be so convicted in what I'm experiencing between the two of us or in the group. And so really relaxing around that conviction and being willing to be wrong, being willing to not know, and being willing to really be gentle. Not everything has to be kicking the door in or punching someone in the face, because our resistance, then sometimes it's good. Sometimes our resistance comes back tenfold. So really learning how to soften. Like I still love hard. Like I am not a person who loves soft. Like if I love you, you know that I love you, and it is fierce and it has edges, and my students experience that. And I am very free with how much I love them. And I have really had to learn to soften my love and soften my approach and get more tender, which was really, really a hard edge for me. And Susan in particular is just, she will ask you the hardest questions, but she is so tender and she is so loving. It is like a relentless, consistent, unfailing, deep kindness in her. And I've learned a lot from being able to train under her and be with her and sit next to her. And she's really helped me to become more tender, because that is still an edge for me. I can just kind of slam it out there and it's like, oh, that did not go over well. Great thing to say, wrong way to say it.
Yeah, that's hard. Because I love Sledgehammer, honestly. Like I love receiving it. I love watching it.
You're four. We're the reactive types, right? Like give me the real fucking deal.
Yeah, but I can imagine it. What's a bad day in your job? Oh, well, not your job, your work.
I had a day where one of my students came back and was in a foul mood, and I was like, what is going on? And he had been sentenced to 170 years in prison. I'm not going to name facilities or anything like that because I don't want too many details out, but I had a student who had been under the influence while driving, hit a child and killed the child. And the student was in court and they were listening to the mother. The student was a type 2. And they came back to me on the break and they said, this was like another week. And they came in on the break and they hadn't been in at the beginning of the class. And they were a very dedicated student. And they said, I need to talk to you for the break. And I said, okay. And we sat knee to knee. And they said to me, I listened to the child's mother and I am pleading guilty and I am taking whatever they want to throw at me because I understand the impact of what I did. And there is no way I can live with myself putting that mom through a court case. And they said, I need you to tell me that I'm doing the right thing because my family and friends don't think I'm doing the right thing. They want me to fight it. They were going to take a case for 10 years. And I said, I hear that you believe that you're doing the right thing. And that is the only thing that matters. Like, I don't actually have an opinion on this. And so I just want to sit with you and be with you in the heaviness of what this is. And we just sat together for like the rest of the break, which is, 10 or 15 minutes only. I ended up seeing the student later at another facility, which never happens, and having them in my classes there. And it was beautiful. And I mean, everything was transformed. And they were like, I am so glad that I chose to take the path that I chose, not the actions, right? But the taking responsibility, the pleading guilty, the moving forward, the changing their life completely from that point on. Those are hard days. They're really hard days because is sentencing someone to 170 years rehabilitation? It's astounding to me what we do in the United States. And I'm not saying we don't need prisons. I'm not saying that we don't need a place for people to heal. Really, we need a place for people to heal. And sometimes jails and prisons are a place for great transformation. Vic says the last time that he had gotten arrested, which was over 7 years ago before I met him, he said he thanked the cop. It's like, thank you, because he knew he needed to be locked up because he was going to hurt himself or he was going to hurt someone else. And so I'm not saying that it's not needed, but the way that we go about it, the way that we do sentencing, the way we're doing, quote unquote, rehabilitation, it's nonsensical. And I'm not saying that there aren't amazing people in the system. I'm not saying that there aren't facilities that are trying to be the change and that there aren't incredible programs. EPP is one of them. And there are many, many other programs that are absolutely incredible. And especially, in California, some of our state prisons have awesome programming. RJ Donovan, San Quentin. I mean, people can be in programs from morning to night. But there is something so hard about the whole system. So it's like trying to do healing work within a system that is inherently punitive. It takes a lot of energy to like protect the space that we're trying to do the work in. And again, there are people in facilities that are angels. I'm thinking Dr. Heather Greenwald is one of them. I mean, absolute angels that are just paving the way for people to be able to come in so people on the inside can heal. But hard days are where there is massive reactivity, or I fuck up big time, or my students come in and they have sentences like that. And I just can't make sense of the world. And I have had hard days are also, when at one point I was teaching 6 to 8 classes a week, which is a fair amount. And we ask our students to do bios. So they write a bio from age 0 to 18 or longer if they want to go into that. And then we respond and we give holding and we tie it with, depending on our background, we are always looking at the Enneagram. We're always looking at trauma. We're always looking at addiction. I have a background in psychology, so I add a lot of psychology into it. And there are some rounds where I was reading and responding to 30 or 40 bios within a 3 or 4 week period. And inevitably at the end of that, I would be crying for like 3 days straight, because looking at what so many of my students have experienced, the most horrific conditions, it is literally a miracle that they are alive at all, and not a surprise that they're incarcerated. So looking at that and seeing all of the things that happen in the world that no one, especially no child, should ever have to experience, those are the hard days.
Okay, good days.
Good days. The standout good days. The standout good days are the days where there's a turnaround, where people have an illumination. It's so interesting. Sometimes there can be so much resistance that people want to be there, but they're definitely not trusting. And there's always a point where I'm like, oh, I got them. Like they're bought in. Something in them is shifting, and they've gone from not sure I trust this to all in. And the best part is those are the students that the next round they come back and they bring all their friends to class. And so but those moments are like tangible. Like there's something that happens in the air and you're like, oh, something big just rippled and something shifted inside of this person. And not because of me, but something shifted inside of them because of the work that they're doing. Or when there will be a really tender moment in class and the participants are rallying around, someone, and they're hugging them and loving them and patting them on the shoulder and saying, it's okay to cry. Just feel what you're feeling, let it out. It's just the amount of love that sometimes happens in the room it's addicting. It's where I want to be. It's a reminder that this exists in the world, that this level of care can even be here in a space where it would be so unexpected, and vulnerability and intimacy. And so there are days where I'm just like, wow, I would literally never experience this anywhere but here.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. The resistance that can come up in the groups that you guide, I'm sure that must be very common. I mean, it's common in inner work groups outside of correctional institutions. But you said in the interview that I listened to, that you said something so beautiful, and I wanted to know more about it. So that everyone has to hold something. What does that mean?
Yeah, I have a mentor who I've been doing group work with for over 15 years she was one of my teachers in my graduate program. And, her thing is that everyone in the group will hold something. And so someone might be the holder of the grief, and someone might be the holder of the resistance, although we all have our resistance, right? And we all have our grief, but often there's kind of a person that embodies that thing, and it might shift. And then, at another point, it might be another person holding that, but to let it all be, there is space for everything. And, often there's the person who's holding the skepticism for the whole group. And they're kind of relentlessly, and what about this? And what about that? But when this happened, and so and to be able to say, okay, you get to have that. And that is a healthy part of a group, that all of these kind of facets and things would be represented. And that right now you're the person who's holding that. Okay. And so much gratitude that they're the person who's holding that thing. And so I always try to make space. If you're the skeptical person, I welcome that. Fuck, I'm a 6, bring it. If you're resistant, I came to the work insisting on sitting in a corner hiding from people. I can honor the resistance too. If you're the one that brings the tears or the one that brings the happiness, also thank you. So I've really learned in that she's incredible. And has just been an amazing, amazing mentor to me. Her name's Dr. Myrtle Heery. And she's had a massive impact on how I show up in groups, not only as a participant, but as a group leader, and really understanding that there's space for everything. So let's just make space for everything. And also let's call it out. Let's name it. Let's bring it to light, because otherwise something is functioning beneath the surface, and that does not feel good, and that's not safe. So let's just acknowledge it and bring it to light, and then let's see what happens. And then all of a sudden it's not so scary. It's not so big. It's not so heavy. We're not dismissing it. We're honoring it. And it's not so big and scary and heavy.
You know, having good mentors for these sort of isolated things, it's so important, isn't it? I'm reflecting as you're speaking that I've probably had an absence of good mentors and I haven't sought them out enough. And maybe that's another way that your type structure has supported you in this work.
I do, I do work in corporate work as well. And I think that there's very often people find a mentor because they have these steps that they want to do, the goals that they want to meet. And so they're moving forward. And I find that pretty common there, irrespective of type. Like, it doesn't really matter. But there is something to what you're saying around the type 6 structure and wanting to find support and wanting to have someone that can help us learn how to lead ourselves, right? To become our own authority, to become our own trusted leader. And I think that when I was younger, I did it really compulsively and also distrustfully. And it had to be these kind of all of these weird circumstances. And it was I would intellectualize everything. And it was almost always like the written word, which is, by the way, is white supremacy. I mean, it's just indoctrinated white supremacy, right? That it has to be the written word. And if you're not published, then you know nothing. And very early on, I had a high school teacher named Marty Shear, and math is just like, my brain does not work that way. She was so insistent that she was going to get me through these classes in high school and into a good college. Thank God for her. And her support, I was like, I want this. And so, I've had her, I had, Dr. Myrtle Heary and Dr. Linda Cunningham in my graduate program. I had someone in my undergrad, and actually I feel so bad. I cannot remember her name because it was so darn long ago. And, and then I've had Susan, and I have learned now to be very judicious and very discerning, to really, not test, but to like assess before I just kind of throw someone on a pedestal, because that was the old pattern, right? I throw you on a pedestal and then you do one thing wrong and now I annihilate you. But with this kind of group of mentor women that I've had mentor me, all the way through Susan now, they won't let me put them on a pedestal. Thank God. So, and that is kind of one of my criteria. If you're going to let me put you on a pedestal, you're definitely not the mentor for me, because my type wants to do that, and it's going to fuck both of us. So, I've had these incredible women, and I'm also thinking of Jeanette Maggio, who's mentored me through so much stuff. And it's like, I am so lucky to find women in all different type structures, by the way, not some 6s, 8, 1, 2, all different type structures. And I still have relationships with all of them. And for the majority, 1 or 2, I'm not in full contact with anymore, but Amy Ream, there's so many women in my life that have helped me to learn how to trust me and reflect me back to me, and then show me healthy boundaries, healthy leadership, healthy guidance, healthy intuition, trusting themselves, self-care. So I've been really, really lucky to have that, because I don't know where I would be without my mentors. And I know that it's definitely a type structure thing. And so I would probably always be be willing to receive the next mentor. I think that's a better way to put it.
I'm honestly just really inspired by it, in among all of the other inspiring things you've shared today, but a totally neglected sort of strategy for me in life. I don't know why, actually. I don't know. I'm going to think about that.
You are missing out. I wanted to just double click on this for you. And I'm
imagining maybe people hearing you speak would be interested in training to be a guide with EPP. And there are all sorts of opportunities now all over the world, not just in the States. There's a community, it's led by Christine Adams, her name is, in the UK, and then I don't know about the other countries, but I will put a link in the episode notes where people can find out. But what qualities and characteristics, in your view, source guides in this work? So what makes a good guide, in other words?
Yeah, the first thing that I think of is humility.
you so
I think
much.
that's really, really important. The best guides that I know are humble. They're humble, they're open, they're curious. We need to be confident in what we know, right? But it's also a turnoff to have a facilitator who is telling you instead of, like inquiring with you or giving an offering or making invitations. And so for me, I think humility is a really important part of being a guide. The other piece that is really important in being a guide, really through, Enneagram Prison Project, do your work, walk your talk, because especially if you want to work in custody, the bullshit detector is massive, because that is what has to be relied on to be able to survive, right, on the inside. And so if I were to walk in and to not be authentic or not be walking my talk, I would get eviscerated. They know if you're the real deal or not, and because that's how they've survived. And so there's a sixth sense there. So we have to do our work in order to be safe and authentic guides and to come to the work in a way that is clean, right? We need to be able to come to the work in a way where we're not bringing all of our shit to the work, because we're actually bringing our shit over here to our therapist. I have had a therapist all the way through, sometimes multiple therapists, depending on what kind of therapies I'm doing. I'm always doing talk therapy, but at one point I was doing EMDR, and now I do brain spotting. I've had a somatic therapist. I believe that hit every part of me with the work. And I don't want to bring my reactivity into the classroom. I don't want to do that. It's not safe and it's not fair. Or if I bring it, it's via story as like a illustration of, and so this shit happened the other day. And this is a great example of how I'm human, just like you. So all of those pieces, the humility, the walking our talk, the conviction that we can all heal no matter what we've done. And if you're a person that has a hard time seeing past the actions of someone into who they are, you're not going to be a good guide, because, we're going to sit with people that have done a lot of things that are really big and really hard to sit with, One of the gentlemen who's just the most incredible type 9s gave me his bio to read, and it talked all about the crime. And, when you're working in jail, the bio responses, the bios themselves, they never talk about the crime because most of them haven't been sentenced. So in prison, though, they're more likely to talk about the crime that got them there, and then their work around that and their healing around that. And in his bio, he wanted me to read it in front of him, which I thought was interesting. I was like, okay. So I'm reading it in front of him, and in his bio, he's talking about all the things that happened to him in his childhood, which was beyond horrendous, and his crime, which was raping and murdering a woman while he was high on PCP. And he took full ownership of everything in it. And I was like, this is the work. Can I see past the crime into the human being that is sitting so earnestly in front of me? And I could, and I did, and thank God. And I don't know that years before that, had I not done the inner work that I had done, that I would have been able to do that. And so if we can't see past the crime into the divine spark that is sitting with us, we're not made to guide. Do something else in EPP where you're still touching the work, but not that, because, as Dr. Daniel says, see people as human beings. Like, just because someone's on the inside doesn't mean they're not a human being. And then I think two other things that I think are really important: our capacity to stay present, right? If you've been around EPP for even a minute, you will hear all of us quote Russ in his thing of how much presence can you tolerate? And, sometimes, especially at the beginning with our participants, like not much, like not even 30 seconds. So how much presence as a guide can I tolerate? Because I actually need to be present for the whole thing. And it can be especially hard to stay present when things get big and difficult and reactive in class. So then the other thing is, in addition to this, can I stay present to your reactivity and my reactivity? Can I bracket my reactivity, and can I help you work with your reactivity? Because I once had someone say, you're really, this was on the outside, that wanted to be a guide, you're really intense and I can't really handle you. And I was like, how in the fuck are you going to be able to handle going inside and being in custody if you can't handle me? Because there's a lot of reactivity a lot of the time in there, and understandably so, right? From the CO level, there can be lots of reactivity there because they're under a lot of pressure to, to staff, to our students our literal students on the inside, or people that aren't our students, but are reactive around our students or coming in and out of the room as we're trying to facilitate. Like, there are so many things where, and moments where that are going to be hard, where there's going to be reactivity, where things might possibly get ugly. And can you tolerate staying present to that? And some people just, it's not their jam. Not only can they not, but they don't fucking want to. And if you don't want to, you shouldn't have to. But I think what happens is people hear us talk about the work and it gets romanticized. And it's like, oh, I want to do that. That sounds incredible. And they look at the ambassadors and they're like, oh, and yes, classes are like that. There's also classes that are hard and messy, and we're having to pull people off panel. We're having to separate people from getting in fist fights and screaming matches. And I mean, stuff, hard shit happens. Or we're having classes where students literally can't sit still because just being in the room with what we're talking about is so unbearable because of the level of trauma that they're holding in their bodies. So this being able to be present, being able to sit in the discomfort, to be with the hard things, to see past, to see through, to hold someone's potential and exactly where they are right now. That is what someone needs in order to be able to be a guide in custody very specifically. It is not easy work. It is massively, massively rewarding. It is such a gift, and it is hard as fuck.
Thank you for that reality check. EPP has a rigorous process before they even allow people to get through to the final stages of training as a guide. And there are multiple other ways, as you said, to be involved in the project that aren't about being a guide. This has been such a joy, and
thank you, Rez. Me too. You're so much fun to chat with.
Next up is Anne Gadd. We're going to be talking about the Enneagram and creativity.